From longitude to latitude, on the mighty open oceans, or the fury of the Great Lakes, they've sunk to the lowest depths, or burned on top of the waves. These treasures on the open waters are now tragedies at sea.
Hello, this is Mickey Hansen with Tragedies at Sea. Today, I brought, this is my brother, Billy Hansen Jr. I brought him today because the show we're going to do is not about a ship that claimed many lives. Rather, it ruined many lives because of the impact it had on the environment. The ship, of course, is the Exxon Valdez. Billy, will you tell me a little bit about the Valdez?
Yes, it was a major oil tanker. On March 30th, 1867, Secretary of State William Seward bought Alaska from Russia for about 2.2 cents an acre, or $7,200,000. People called it Seward's Folly and Seward's Icebox until they found out about the region's many natural resources. But the one we're going to discuss is oil. In 1968, the Atlantic Ridge Field Company discovered in Prudhoe Bay a large oil deposit. Despite complaints from environmental groups, the company auctioned off oil and gas leases on the oil fields 450,000 acres. Everything looked smooth until the disaster struck. The environmentalists' worst fears were realized. On March 23rd, 1989, the Exxon Valdez ran aground in Prince William Sound, spilling nearly 11 million gallons of crude oil. It was caused because Captain John Hazelwood, who was sleeping off the effects of the alcohol, left the first mate in charge of navigating the ship. This was wrong because, one, according to maritime laws, merchant vessels are not allowed to have any alcoholic beverages on board. And two, in environmentally sensitive areas such as Alaska, the captain is to be available at all times. Because of Hazelwood, the people in the area were affected or hit in several ways. For starters, the primary income is fishing. Shellfish take 20 years to recover from petroleum poisoning. The only seafood not affected was salmon. Luckily, they were out to sea when the tragedy struck. To give you an example of how bad it can get, let's say this is a shellfish. This is petroleum. As you can see, shellfish absorb petroleum like crazy. Also, another thing, also affecting the area was the wildlife. If you take a close look, a side cutaway pattern of otter, you'll find it's got 3 layers. The skin, then a middle layer, and a top layer. The middle layer is what keeps the animal dry. It's got very fine, thick hairs, I should say. It takes when that gets clogged with oil, the animal's natural insulating properties are affected. They can drown, or at very least die from exposure. Almost the same goes for seabirds. They take like ducks. They have some real fine layer of feathers underneath the top layer. When they get filled, they can drown. Plus, birds like ducks and others have to preen themselves. When they touch, there's an oil gland at the base of the tail. Unfortunately, when seabirds come in contact with oil, they drink in some of that oil. and they can die because of the oil getting into their systems. One petroleum byproduct is DDT. People used it as an insecticide. One problem: fish are affected by runoffs from farmers' fields because it has to go into the streams. If they take and gets into the fish, they have to eat. And because of it, a lot of the eggshells become brittle. We almost lost the American bald eagle because of it. The bald eagle, one of the last bald eagle strongholds, is in Alaska, and it's almost extinct up there. Because of John Hazelwood, Joseph Hazelwood. Because of Joseph Hazelwood, the oil could have gotten into the fish, and it could have been absorbed into the bald eagle's reproductive system, and we could have gotten very brittle eggs. Because of it, we would have lost our national symbol. Also goes for the peregrine falcon. And when they try to clean up the mess, it was a bad thing from the start. They didn't have the equipment they needed in place. They didn't have the adequate training. Well, it was on paper all right, but the equipment wasn't there. If Exxon had been responsible, they would have had the equipment in place to be used at all times, ready to be used at any given moment, and they would have trained the people to use it. And they were using oil-eating bacteria, one of the newest technologies we got. But when they hit the area with high-pressure hoses, the land area, it took and washed away the bacteria, which made the problem even worse. What they should do, in my personal opinion, is make Hazelwood not only lose his license for life, which they did, but they had him clean up the mess.
How about talking a little bit about the impact it had on the fishermen in the area?
Oh, yes. The fishermen were really affected. Half the money was in those boats. And one of the primary industries they got up there is fishing. We get a lot of our shellfish, such as crab, shrimp, scallops, shrimp, and other animals. A typical king crab female, for instance, will lay about 250,000 eggs. If she catches if she gets the poison into her eggs, goodbye king crab. It takes about 6 years for a king crab to reach maturity from a larval stage. And since the shellfish are going to be inedible for 20 years, that's going to hit them really bad. Also tourism, like I said earlier, it affected the bald eagle and stuff. And if we have no birds or any other life in the area, it's going to be a dead area. And who's going to want to visit the area in the first place? So both fishing and tourism were affected big time.
While we're at it, I thought we'd show a little bit about the impact the Exxon Valdez tragedy had on Alaska. This is Alaska right here. It is the 50th state in the Union and by far the largest of the 50.
Actually, 49th state.
49th. Well, anyway, the oil spill hit around here, and the impact went from New York all the way to, it did go to New York and Florida, just that distance. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Nope.
Well, what was the story on Exxon? What became of them?
Well, they face major lawsuits from the fishermen, and the fishermen won, and which I'm glad of. What they should do is, I know there's a policy not to check their background, but I would suggest they check any sea captain's background. If he has an alcohol or drug record, they should not hire him. Because if they do, it's a sign of irresponsibility. I picked up an old saying somewhere, is that the power of the wealth reminds me of an old saying. With great power comes great responsibility. In Exxon's case, they should use their check the background of certain captains. If they're alcoholic or they have a drug problem, they should not hire them. And to my personal opinion, this could have been avoided if they had checked Hazelwood's background.
How about talking a little bit about the whales that were in the area?
Oh yes, whales were also affected too. They have absorbed, even though you may not realize it, but the outer skin of a whale is also absorbent, as like a sponge there. As you can see here, how much oil went down. A lot of women, a lot of the Eskimos up there eat whale meat, whale blubber, and fat acts like a real good sponge. They have a lot of problems with it. In fact, to give you an idea how bad pollution can affect the Eskimos, this is not dealing with oil, but it deals with another one, gold, which was discovered up there in that area. They use 3 elements when they leach the gold out: mercury, cyanide, and arsenic. And a lot of the leavings from that there is being absorbed into the fish and whales. I hate to sound personal, women, but a lot of the nursing Eskimos, there's been a high incident of mercury poisoning because of the nursing Eskimo women are passing it on to their babies, and it's killing a lot of the babies. There's a high mortality rate among the Eskimos that have eaten that meat.
I want to talk a little bit more about the Eskimos themselves. Do you know if they've taken any action against Exxon or against Cable?
Not as far as I know, Mick. Not as far as I know, but I'm pretty sure they are. And right now, there hasn't been any recent court cases, as far as I can remember.
What about the court cases that have been filed? Has it been strictly fishermen, or what's been the deal on that? Has the state
mostly fishermen, because of their livelihoods. They rely on the fishing industry to live. And what makes it worse is that they can only fish at certain times of the year.
From when to when?
Usually from April up through September, I believe.
And the Valdez round took place about March, so it's only about, about 2 months before the fishing season began.
That is correct.
And it's a tragedy. It's amazing how one person can have such a tremendous impact negatively on such an environmentally sensitive environment.
Well, people are people, Mick. He thought he could get away with it. But we can be thankful he lost his job, but what good does that do?
I know. Those fishermen's livelihood have been ruined forever because of that.
Right, they can't get another job. Fishing's the only thing they know. A lot of these fishermen their skills are passed down from father to son. And it's the only life they do know. You got to remember, Alaska has got very few places where you can farm. And salmon industry is the primary industry in that area.
I remember 80% of the state's forest.
That is correct. The name Alaska comes from an Indian word meaning great land. And it is a great land.
Its nickname is the last frontier, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. Also, it's called the land of the midnight sun. And it's really something.
By ironic twist, my brother Billy was born in Alaska, as were 2 of my sisters, and plus our parents were married in Alaska. So for Billy, I'm confident that the accident did hit you hard personally.
Right, I've been reading up on this date. There's a book and a video we would recommend.
Well, I don't have a book, but this video I very strongly recommend. It's called Outrage at, you can't get a good shot at it. It's called Alaska Outrage at Valdez. When Jacques Cousteau was still living, right after the Exxon Valdez tragedy, he'd actually gone to the area and saw the horrors of the wake of the oil spill. Birds covered with oil. Fishermen left without a livelihood. And, have you had a chance to watch that Cousteau special?
Yeah, I have, and it is very good. I would advise you to watch that video. It will give you a lot of information. And if you want to see tragedy like this prevented, take and contact your congressman and try to enforce laws that prevent tragedies like this from happening again. Tell the companies like Exxon, Standard Oil, and others to make it a policy to check the background of their pilots. If they have like I said, if they get a record of alcohol or drug abuse, get rid of them. We don't want another Exxon Valdez. Also, take and enforce the ruling there is to be no alcohol served on board merchant vessels. The book I mentioned is a book by James Michener. It is called Alaska. It is an excellent novel. I have a copy myself. It tells about the history of Alaska, including the old days, and get a better feel for the state. Also, check on Discovery Channel. They might be showing an episode on Alaska's wildlife. They just recently did one. Also, TBS, the Internal Broadcasting System's got it too. There's a lot of good books out there. Also, have your kids go to your local library and check out books in Alaska. Look in the encyclopedias. They'll get a better feel for the state.
One thing you forgot to mention when we were talking about safety standards, there was some talk about putting triple hulls on oil tankers.
Yes, which I think would be a good idea. What he's talking about is in 3 layers. Mickey, I need your hand for this. Consider this 3 layers. If the outside layer gets cut, you still got 2 on the inside. They're now talking about making that mandatory on all vessels. Another thing, in states like Alaska that have oil in Prudhoe Bay, make sure the equipment's in place. Keep at the company until the equipment's in place and get the training in how to use it.
One thing we should mention to our television audiences is that we should consider weaning from oil and go to safer methods like solar power and wind.
That is correct. We got, especially in cars, they've already got the technology for solar powered cars. Trouble is, the big gas companies and automotive companies, they take and they snap up these patents and stuff and keep them hidden. We've got the technology, let's use it, or at least develop it. We should not rely on crude oil. When they protested the Alaska pipeline about 20 or 30 years ago, it was overland pipes. This was through another area too, up in Alaska, right up here. That there they had, that was right on the run of the caribou herd. They were afraid that oil would get into the streams and they would ingest it. And the environmentalists, in my personal opinion, were right. They should have been concerned.
Yeah, a lot of the more conservative people believe environmentalists are about a bunch of wackos, tree-hugging nuts that impose a hardship on people, and that's just not true.
We gotta be reasonable. We understand they get a livelihood, but we have very few, like clear-cut forests, for instance. We have very few of them left, like in Washington and Oregon.
Remember the spotted owl controversy?
Yes. Some of these environmental laws they've got are a little bit outrageous. They should do it within reason. They got to take into consideration there are people out there that are trying to make a living. And too many times the environmentalists care about themselves. Look at they are trying to kill the gray wolf. They got that up in Alaska, and also in Yellowstone. They don't stop and realize that those those wolves are out there for a reason, to keep the deer populations down. They're wondering why they want to have all these hunts. It's people's own darn fault. These animals, like the gray wolf, are there to keep the population down. And that area can only support so many deer, and that's it.
You might also want to talk to the audience about the problems they have with DDT, how it would thin the eggs of all the eagles.
I mentioned that earlier.
But
yeah, trouble is the birds like the peregrine falcon, which you probably will be seeing downtown a few times in Fort Wayne at the Summit 1 building. They got a nest there. People were using DDT to get rid of insects like mosquitoes and stuff, but trouble is it goes right into underground streams. It goes into lakes. It's absorbed by fish and other animals. And those birds have to ingest it. And then we have to eat that fish. I'm glad they banned DDT because it thins the eggs.
But there's a lot of other pesticides that people are using. And people don't realize insects would be more effective, cheaper, and a lot more environmentally sound. Having animals that actually eat those insects do the job for you.
I did a TV show just recently, just before this one. It was on insect pests in the garden. I would ask that you, if they have it on the air, watch it. There's some good information in there on why we should use natural methods, not unnatural. And when I say unnatural, I mean chemicals. There are some pesticides that are safe to use. They're so safe you can spray it on vegetables and you can eat it right after you get done eating the vegetable.
I was discussing a little bit about those chemicals.
Yes, you can get them. Check with your Cooperative Extension Service. They have information on these. And go and check around. Read the instructions carefully if it says it's safe. Like, or check with an organic gardener. He would know some of this stuff. He has the information right there at his disposal. He can tell you safe pesticides to use. That way we don't have it go into our streams.
Yeah, I wish the miners in Alaska had known that. Best of my knowledge, a lot of the poisons they used in Alaska are still there.
Oh, you ain't kidding. The gold rush days happened in the 1800s. That gives you an idea how bad it is. They used those three chemicals to leach out the gold. They didn't realize how an impact would have on wildlife.
Yeah, and now we have a modern example with the Exxon Valdez tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think we're blowing it out of proportion. It didn't have much of an impact. And I wish those people would actually go out to Alaska and see for themselves whether it didn't do much damage or not.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, there was an impact here in the continental U.S. We had to pay more for gasoline, and we had to pay more for a lot of the food we take for granted, like lobster, clams, and what have you.
Mm-hmm. You ain't kidding there. I like seafood as much as my brother does. But the reason why we're paying such high prices for the seafood is because they have to get it somewhere else and they can't. It takes 20 years to recover from this tragedy.
So it's going to be about 2009 before it's anywhere like it was.
That is correct, and it's going to take a long time. When they lifted up rocks, which I saw in that video there was still oil underneath.
You might want to tell them about the botched efforts Exxon made to try to clean up the mess.
Like I said earlier, they use high-pressure hoses using hot water. But that washed away the bacteria and everything else. Oil is a hard thing to get rid of.
Crude oil is even worse.
And up in Alaska, they got such cold temperatures during winter months, it's like tar. And that's very hard to remove.
And it's just terrible. We've had obviously had oil spills in the past, but the only one I can think of that even approaches the one that hit Exxon was right after we won the Persian Gulf War, when Saddam Hussein dumped all Kuwait's oil into the Persian Gulf.
No, that's not quite true. What he did is he blew up the oil derricks.
He blew them up?
He blew them
Blew
up.
them up. Excuse, pardon my grammar, but...
Blew them up. In fact, it was such a heavy black cloud, they couldn't see through that cloud. That's why Saddam Hussein did it, because of the pods of the
Basically, if I can't have it, nobody can.
He wanted to prevent the pilots from seeing him retreat.
Oh. It
took them about a month to finally cap those oil wells. They went up like a huge flame. If you ever watch their TV shows, you'll find out that some of these oil plants, they have flames shooting in the air. Well, this was a lot worse. A lot worse. They had very high temperatures. And it was just like the Exxon Valdez in one respect. A lot of wildlife got covered with oil. Saddam Hussein basically wanted Kuwait because it was on his way.
You might want to talk a little bit about the wildlife impact it had on the Persian Gulf. How it hurt the area in the Middle East.
We got a lot of endangered species in that area. A lot of them. And there were birds coated with oil. They had a mess to clean. Think of a town like Fort Wayne. That's how big the area was to us.
It's so senseless.
Agreed. All in that case, both things have in common. Both Exxon Valdez and the Persian Gulf War have one thing in common. It was a matter of greed.
Yeah. For those of you who might have watched the my Great Lakes specials, I talked about how people want to try to squeeze in one more profit before winter, and that shit's voyage ends up being the last. And now we got with the oil. People want to squeeze in one more tonnage of oil, try and get as much profit as they can. Don't care whether or not who gets hurt in the process. Go right ahead and get that oil, cut a hole in the tanker, and then presto, we got end up with the worst oil spill in American history.
And they didn't even bother to check Hazelwood, which was made matters worse. It was a powder keg waiting to blow up.
It's pathetic, their screening process for sea captains. I could apply for a captainship and get it without any problems. Billy, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to cut this short, but I hope you will watch this video I've just recommended and learn a lot about the Exxon Valdez tragedy. I thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to you watching my next show.
From longitude to latitude, on the mighty open oceans, or the fury of the Great Lakes, they've sunk to the lowest depths, or burned on top of the waves. These treasures on the open waters are now tragedies at sea.